Collecting games a lot of fun until it's not. And when it comes to throwing a metaphorical turd in the punch bowl, nothing does the trick quite like high prices. Regardless of why you think prices are as high as they are, or who you like to blame for it, something we can pretty much all agree on is that we'd like prices to be lower. Well, in an ideal world, the whole supply and demand thing works beautifully, like two lovers dancing in unison. There's demand and then supply that comes to meet it. Unfortunately, when it comes to retro games, you're dancing with an invisible partner because supply has left the party. And what supply there is, pursuing it is less of an elegant dance and more of an assault. These older games aren't produced anymore in physical format. For the most part, yeah, occasionally cartridges get released, sure, and there's stuff like the mini consoles, which might meet the demand for some, but clearly not everyone. People want the original stuff. Games that were sold in stores years ago, purchased by folks like us, in some cases held onto by folks like us, but in many cases went on a journey to who knows where. And yet, I'd like to think most of us are once again in possession of a lot of these copies of games. But in some cases, who really knows? And either way, there's not enough and their prices in the secondhand market have gone up to reflect that. At least when it comes to games that people want. Alright, so if that's the situation, then why not just buy the games that most people don't want? Because we don't want them either. Actually, maybe you do. And if you do, you could be in luck for the games where demand hasn't completely destroyed the supply. But for the most part, people want the really popular games. The majority of the time, good games have earned their popularity for a reason. Sure, every game has its haters, but for the most part, games have earned their popularity from lots of people who played the game and enjoyed the game, therefore resulting in higher odds that there are more people who would also enjoy them. Makes sense to me. So, with prices being as high as they are, some people have said, hey, I got a solution, screw them. If I don't like the prices, then why should I pay them? I already pay for enough things that I don't want to. Rent/mortgage, bills, decisions I made in high school. Yeah, screw this collecting crap, but whoa, hold on a second there, Sparky. We don't necessarily need to be so dramatic. You could always just, I don't know, collect less, not as frequently. Sometimes a bad experience doesn't mean you need to swear something off entirely, just pivot or go a different direction with it. For example, I once got a bad banana from a dumpster in the alley behind a store and thought to myself, alright, no more getting my bananas from there, gotta go inside the store and buy them from now on. And wouldn't you know it, that worked out great for me. At the very least, if you're planning on quitting collecting games, why not just say, well, let's see what it looks like in 5 or 10 years. I mean, what have you got to lose? If prices don't get better, you were planning on quitting forever anyways. But maybe it's just too darn painful to check prices and you're looking to make a statement. I'm quitting retro game collecting. If you're doing it for your own personal sanity, I can understand that. If you're looking to stick it to somebody, I'm not sure who you'd be sticking it to. I suppose it would be the sellers. I know that when some people hear others say stuff like that, they just think, alright, one more person out of the way and more games for me. When it comes to solutions for game collecting, the easiest solution might be for those who have already been collecting for a while. Odds are you've accumulated quite a few games by this point. So in theory, you could just say, well, I think I'm pretty much good for the time being and don't need to collect anymore. Maybe a game every once in a while, just brand new games or something like that. Problem is, if there's still a handful of games left that you want to add to your collection, they may already be expensive and seemingly only getting more expensive. If you've been collecting for a while, you've seen how things can go. Remember when Symphony of the Night was only $30? Well, anybody who only just started looking for it recently doesn't. You don't want to end up paying more for a game because you waited, so game collecting almost starts to feel like a necessary evil or guilty pleasure for some, kind of like me looking at pictures of chubby cats. I know it's probably not healthy for the cats, but they're just so darn cute. Paying a lot for a game sucks, but in some cases, not having the game at all might be what sucks more. How am I supposed to go to bed at night without knowing I own Super Monkey Ball? Okay, but if you already own most of the games you want, couldn't you just bite the bullet on the last few games you want and be done with it? Well, problem is, some of the last few bullets to bite might be more like rocket-propelled grenades, so get your chompers ready, cause it could hurt. I suppose you could always ration that you don't need those last few games though. I mean, at what point are you done collecting older games? Never? These old games have stopped coming out, so what is the end goal? Every game ever made? You gotta stop at some point or die trying. And what about the games you already have? Don't they deserve some attention? With how much people talk about their giant backlogs, you'd think it might be kind of nice in a way to not add more to it. But what, am I crazy? You can't be a gamer without adding to your backlog. Well, luckily, if you still want to add to your backlog without having to collect games, you can. As I like to bring up, you don't need to collect to play games, especially these days. We got all sorts of nifty solutions for playing games, whereas back in the day, playing without original hardware kinda looked something like this. We've come a long ways. Even if you want to stick with your original hardware, there's still solutions that make it so you don't have to buy each individual game. I mean, having to buy each and every single game you want individually is what gets things super expensive. It almost feels like the solutions that have come about to circumvent the need to purchase original games is a way of fighting back against the dilemma of expensive collecting. Not to mention gearing up for the long haul. Not only do we want to play these games until we're dead, if you're like me, you want the younger generations to be playing these games too. So we need methods that we can rely on, because if there's something a lot of us feel like we can't rely on, it's game companies. They're more focused on selling us whatever is new. Understandable in some ways, I guess. Anyways, with all the solutions for playing games we have nowadays, combined with high prices, this has a lot of people feeling comfortable about stopping/slowing their collecting of games, or perhaps just really tempted at the very least. Another reason people may want to stop collecting games is because that certain magic is just gone. The days of finding cheap retro games isn't completely gone, but for some people it sure does feel that way, at least in terms of game hunting. Part of the thrill of collecting used to be showing up to a flea market, garage sale, or wherever, and not knowing what treasures you might find. Nowadays, game hunting can still have that same element of surprise, but it's more likely to be along the lines of, oh my goodness, how can one person have so much old tableware? Ultimately, I think the main driving force for people wanting to get out of collecting comes from a bad taste being left in their mouth. It feels like the market is bloated and buying games is only feeding into it. It's one thing to pay money for something, but it's entirely another thing to feel good about where that money is going. Quick example for you, Girl Scout cookies. Those suckers are expensive, and yet a lot of us get suckered into them because we feel like it's going to a good cause. And given the choice of either feeling guilty for eating a treat or feeling guilty for saying no to a child trying to raise money, yeah, let's go with the treats. With collecting old games, at times you could feel like you're panic buying expensive games and growing an inflated market in the process. To some, that may just not feel very good. I can understand that. My personal recommendation is to just be more methodical about it. Well, maybe not that methodical, but just be more selective about which games you want. Spread your purchases out. I find that makes your collection feel more intentional and ultimately more personal. But that's just my suggestion, and naturally, what works best for each of you will vary. Heck, maybe some of you want to stop collecting simply because you're running out of space, although perhaps there's an answer you've cooked up for that problem as well. But whatever you do, don't quit retro gaming altogether out of your frustration with the collecting aspect of it. Remember my story about the bad banana? You can all have your happy ending too. Keep playing games. Where there's a will, there's a way. The only thing that not collecting games prevents you from doing is not collecting games. You can still play, and if you're passionate about this hobby, you absolutely should. But with all that said, I'd be interested to hear what your thoughts on collecting are. Tell us how you feel, while still, of course, being respectful to your fellow retro gamers, as always. So, for that and anything else you'd like to say, leave your comment down below, and I will see ya in the next video.
He's the retro bird, yeah, and he's talking about video games. He's the retro